Ons fokus vanoggend op die tamatiebedryf en Clive Garrett van ZZ2 sluit nou by ons aan om daaroor te gesels. Goeiemôre Clive en hartlik welkom.
Goeiemôre Elsa, baie dankie vir die geleentheid.
Clive, my eerste vraag is, het die COVID-19 pandemie enige impak op die Suid-Afrikaanse tamatiebedryf gehad?
Also, no, it didn't. Not COVID per se. Agriculture was obviously an essential service, and we managed to compartmentalize our farms in such a way that we could carry on working uninterrupted. So COVID itself actually had no effect on the tomato industry.
Goed, dis baie goed om te hoor. Wat behels die huidige tekort aan tamaties en wat was die effek van die droogte op hierdie spesifieke uitdaging? Want ek weet daar's baie onduidelikheid wanneer dit by hierdie kwessie kom.
Yes, also we actually had a terrible drought situation right up until December. And then, of course, we got some fantastic rains in January and February. So much so that we probably had more rain in January and February than we receive in a normal year. And obviously, when you receive excess rains, it goes along with all kinds of problems. You can't get into the lands, your spraying programs get behind, there's an infestation of pests. And so, yes, we have experienced that, but we're extremely thankful for the rains that we've received. I mean, before the rains came, if you remember correctly, the Zanine Dam was, I think, below 9% even. It's actually now overflowing. And many of the other streams are now running, the groundwater levels have risen. So all in all, yes, it has created a bit of a shortage of tomatoes, but it's only a temporary shortage, but it actually bodes extremely well for the winter months.
Goed, Clive, ek wil graag verwys na 'n berig van verlede week, so 'n mens wil amper half vir 'n oomblik stil staan by hierdie spesifieke kwessie. Ja, volgens die berig van verlede week het die prys van tamaties die hoogte ingeskiet nadat swaar reën en oorstromings weens die tropiese storm Eloise skade aan oeste in Limpopo aangerig en tot 'n marktekort gelei het. Teen die middel van die maand het die prys binne 'n week met 47% gestyg en daar was toe nou ook verwys na die besturende direkteur van Agrimark Trends, Johnny van der Merwe, wat gesê het, tamaties het die maand 'n rekordprys van R16.82 per kilogram op varsproduktemarkte gehaal. En hy het ook gesê die prys sal na verwagting eers teen die tweede week van volgende maand weer normaliseer. So wat is jou opinie rakende so 'n berig?
Yes, I think he's absolutely spot on. The price of tomatoes is based on supply and demand. The majority of ZZ2's products still go to the national fresh produce markets. And basically there it's an auction and the highest bidder wins. So when there's very small supply of tomatoes on the market, the price gets bid up. The price of tomatoes is very elastic. And as soon as there's a shortage, the price goes up. And when there's an oversupply, the price drops. If we look back in December, there was a little bit of an oversupply. Prices were extremely low. But of course, now with the rains and the shortage that we had, prices have increased. But it's very temporary. It's a short-term increase, and as I said earlier, the rains now bode very well for a very good winter crop production, and so we should see probably in the next week or two prices already starting to come down.
Deur watter ander uitdagings word die bedryf tans geraak?
Elsa, I think farming in South Africa is not easy. I think all farmers know that. I think the biggest challenge that we have at the moment is minimum wages. They've upped the agricultural minimum wage, and then of course Eskom. I think all industries are struggling with Eskom. Load shedding makes the watering of your crops extremely difficult. The irrigation, we are dependent on Eskom still. So I think those two challenges, the minimum wages and Eskom, are probably our biggest challenges.
And are there any solutions for these challenges?
Obviously, there are. What we're doing in terms of the minimum wage, we're looking at where we can become more efficient. So we don't want to lay off workers. That's the last thing that we want to do. Obviously, you can only push efficiency so far, but we've seen what we can do in that respect. In terms of electricity challenges, as I heard on your news report just recently now, we're also looking at alternative energy sources. We're looking at solar. We're looking at wind. In fact, we've done very big studies in this regard, and we should be rolling out some pilot projects shortly.
Clive, ons het net vroeër na 'n paar van die uitdagings verwys en dan ook iets soos die pryskwessie, maar hoe gaan dit oor die algemeen met die Suid-Afrikaanse tamatiebedryf?
Also, I think it's going well. As you know, tomatoes are a staple diet, and I think that's why there's been such an outcry. We eat it from salads to our pizzas, but otherwise, generally, I think it's going very well. The industry spread out from Limpopo all the way down to the Eastern and the Western Cape. So not everybody has been as badly affected as we have here in the North. So generally, I think the tomato industry is in a good space at the moment.
En hoe vergelyk die Suid-Afrikaanse bedryf met die res van die buiteland of die wêreld? Of is dit 'n moeilike vergelyking om te tref?
Also, it is quite difficult, but I think in Europe, if you look in Europe, it's mainly the production there because of the climatic conditions is mainly in glass houses that are artificially heated, whereas in South Africa we still have what we call open field production. So it's quite different. I mean, in the closed structures, your yield per hectare is much higher, whereas in the open structures, you're more exposed to the elements. So it's not really comparable because of the different farming techniques.
Is there anything else that you can point out at this stage in terms of imports and exports?
Yes, also look, tomatoes are not imported or exported. South Africa produces all the tomatoes it needs. We also export very, very little tomatoes. Tomatoes are too heavy and they don't have a very long shelf life and they're very, very easily damaged. So we may fly, when we have an order for some of our specialty tomatoes, we may fly some of them out to the Middle East, but generally we don't export any tomatoes. A lot of the tomatoes that are produced in South Africa get taken up into our neighboring countries, and there I'm talking Namibia, Botswana, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, as far as Zambia. We've even seen our tomatoes up into Angola. So yes, we are feeding the whole SADC, but if you're talking Europe and further afield, we don't export.
En Clive, wat is ZZ2 se verwagtinge of voorspellings wat die kort en langtermyn betref?
Okay, also, as I said, it was a short-term shortage. We expect to be back in full production in the middle of next month. Our production has now moved from the Polokwane and Maketsi areas, has moved to behind the Sopansberg, to places like Waterpoort, Pondrift, Messina, and it's looking much better there. The crops are looking very promising. We've actually started the first pickings from those areas, and as we come into full production, we should get back to normal.
Is daar enige geleenthede met betrekking tot die toekoms wat basies seker net maar aansluit by die vorige vraag, maar spesifiek geleenthede?
Are you referring specifically to tomato farming?
Yes.
Well, yes, obviously, Elsa, there always are opportunities. We reach out to all the communities around us to assist where we can. Tomato farming, you really need to do on a big scale because it's quite a low value product most of the time. I know not at the moment. You really need to do it on a bigger scale than just to have 1 or 2 hectares of tomatoes.
Goed, en dan laastens, Clive, jy weet, wanneer 'n mens byvoorbeeld kyk na die gewildheid van tamatieboerdery, dink jy dit is iets wat in die toekoms gaan toeneem?
Also, I think my previous comment, tomato farming is not easy. As our CEO always says, if you want to farm tomatoes, you need to eat, sleep, and drink tomatoes. You need to sleep next to your crop to make sure nothing goes wrong. But yeah, obviously there are always opportunities in farming, and if you can produce a better crop than your neighbor, obviously there are always opportunities. If I look at the way ZZ2 started, we started with a few hectares, and because of that dedication and that absolute focus on the crop. We did very well, and if somebody else comes along and beats us at that, there are always opportunities.
Goed, Clive, baie dankie vir jou tyd en baie dankie dat jy so vroeg opgestaan het om met ons te gesels.
Dankie, Elsa.
Dit was dan Clive Garrett van ZZ2.